Welcome to the Northwest Passages Virtual Forum. I'm Kristi Burns. I put together our Northwest Passages book clubs and community forum events like this one. Today's topic is students and mental health. I'm joined by members of the Spokane Schools District 81 Mental Health Team, Mental Health Supervisor Marilis Thomas, Mental Health Supervisor Julie Cruz, and Director of Mental Health David Crump. I am thrilled that you're here today. Can you talk about how you've been getting ready for real-time virtual school as it's starting up this September, and what you've been doing this summer and what you're looking forward to that's starting in September, a couple weeks away?
Boy, we've been busy all summer working with kids and their families, doing virtual home visits, as it were, or one-on-one groups, all kinds of things. And so we'll continue doing that.
Have you been, so if you were seeing a student during the school year, you've been continuing to see them virtually via, I guess, Zoom meetings?
Absolutely. And some of the therapists are also seeing kids face to face, of course, using social distancing, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes meeting them in parks, going for walks, sitting on their front porch, taking them lunch, checking in with them.
I love that, taking them lunch. Making that's a good one too, out in parks.
One of the things we found, it's really been interesting, is we found that we have had greater parental involvement with some of the younger kids on the Zoom calls, because the therapist will be talking to the student and the parent will walk by. And in many ways, we've gotten into more homes than we've gotten before, because we're actually in the home. The adolescents have not really liked Zoom calls or team, different modalities that way, unless it's a group. And then they seem to participate. They've enjoyed more the phone call, or if we can at least get kind of like Julie was talking about, more face-to-face. So we've been trying a lot of different ways to say, if there's some emotional fragility or mental health concerns, it doesn't stop in the summer. So our clinicians have been working really hard to engage families and quite a variety of the telehealth modalities.
Telehealth, that of course, that I don't know why I didn't think of that before. Marilis, have you been working and doing the telehealth kind of conferencing with students in your community?
I'm not actually working with any students directly. I'm supervising our therapists. So I've been able to work with our therapists and discuss kind of the ways that they're engaging kids and families in groups and individual sessions and family sessions via Zoom and or in person.
So there's been other training that you've had to do. Are you on the front lines of implementing new protocols, or?
Definitely. As things are always changing, we're always implementing the new protocols and the new procedures with our staff. So as you probably guess, it's changing all the time. And as we enter the school year, I know our staff are really gearing up to partner and collaborate with their school buildings and teachers and administration so that they can connect with as many families and kids as possible.
How do you envision that happening with school happening on screen? And what issues do you already fear or worry about with kids connecting on screen? How kids will be able to connect with their teachers? Well, let's start with the first part of that. Are you concerned about anything in particular with teaching on screen? Anybody?
I think some of it will be, we will have taken some lessons over last spring and changed some things to help kids and families adapt. Some kids will actually be in buildings that have special needs for, limited amount of time, limited amount of kids, which I think is going to make a lot of difference for the families that we work with.
I can tell you, I do have some anxiety, but I also believe that we, as Julie mentioned, we really have learned from the spring and the kind of the trauma that first pandemic did with us, and we kind of went virtual. The anxiety of going back into school in an all day for a lot of our kids. We've provided structure and set start and stop times. Many of the teachers will be teaching actually from the classroom, and that they will be able to have that, will kind of help with some of the anxiety. So, if you look at it, we are kind of looking at this behavioral surge kind of hitting in the fall. We've been coping with this and dealing with this all summer, but yeah, I'm worried about anxiety, depression, and even kind of really negative thoughts as the fall hits. But I think the teachers can establish relationships, through virtual methods on a very consistent basis to kind of provide that.
With the Chromebooks that are being given out to the schools, I know that people that have their own, or families that have their own laptops, they can install, I guess, for lack of better words, kind of, it's an app that will let you know if your kid is typing words that then indicate that they're depressed, or they are on websites that they're 13 and they shouldn't be on. The Chromebooks that are going home with students now, are they, what's the word I'm looking for? Is there some kind of like a babysitting kind of protocol that's being put on them, or can you speak to how the Chromebooks are set up?
I'm not too techie in that world, but I can tell you the district has put a lot of effort into firewalls and to access that. We also have a lot of striving for a lot of cooperation and monitoring from the parents. This is really, in the pandemic and as we go into this physical isolation, we try to promote social connectedness.
Yeah.
And parents and guardians they're our partners, and we need their help, but we know that the firewalls, we know that monitoring for certain words, we can do that and do that. But one of the things that we really need, and this is just a huge clue to families, is we just watch for changes from baseline. And I mean, if all of a sudden they get really sad or depressed or start doing things that's not normal, or they go the other way, and all of a sudden they're super excited and like, wow, why the change? And I know that's a little divergent from what you were saying on keywords and things like that.
No, I think that there's no app that's going to be a substitute for good parenting, but being that there are parents that will be at home as their children are working and at school. Not everybody is going to mandate that their kids be at the kitchen table. Some age kids will want to have their Chromebooks up in their bedrooms. How we can, as parents and caregivers, or I know in some cases, Julie, you were talking about grandparents that are working with kids to try and get ADHD kids, wait, it's not a video game, but you need to be typing. Tools that are going to help students actually work when they're in front of the computer for at least 2 to 3 hours a day. Julia, you have any tips on
Well, I was just thinking, I don't know that it's necessarily a tip, but again, I think this will go back to parents and teachers having good communication on, missed your son or daughter today, or, they seem to be struggling in a certain area, because sometimes that'll be an indication of why the kids aren't doing it. It's, they're too depressed, or they're too anxious, or for whatever reason, and they just disappear. So I think having that good communication is going to be really key for all of us really to be working together as best we can in this situation.
How would you advise kids to maintain, or how can they make new social connections safely during the pandemic over the laptop while they're in class? Mostly in class. I don't want to say that I was a class clown, but chatty Cathys or people that's usually a good thing or a bad thing when we're talking about online school?
I think there's various ways teachers will do activities with kids that will help them to interact online in class. And I think that, that's how friendships are made and kids socialize a good part of their day. For us, a lot of the therapists are doing groups. Some of them are very socially based. We've had all summer long therapists that have dropped like bags off that had different things in it for the kids to use. So they all have the same stuff, and then they come together and, do some things. And that's been a real success.
Yeah, and to add to that, I was thinking, Julie, just that, like you were saying, that communication and collaboration, teachers will have the most vision, I guess they'll have their eyes on kids during the class period. And if they're seeing some kids who aren't engaging as much and aren't as comfortable speaking up on a Zoom class session, those might be times that teachers are connecting with the mental health therapist from their building saying, hey, are you running any social skills groups right now? This student from my class could really benefit from just doing a fun, connected social skills group with other kids in the building.
I talked to several teachers today, and we were talking about engagement on social media, and really the teachers are pretty excited about and interested in saying, we're going to keep constant engagement and getting responses back. First of all, they need to have the screen on so the teacher can see that they're not sleeping during class, but every 5 to 10 minutes, they're going to either be doing breakouts, they're going to be asking specific questions. So highly engaged to say, wow, are you tracking? Are you there? And being able to kind of get that social connectedness, not only with the teacher, but with other peers through that. And that actually is a way that a lot of students are comfortable in social connection, and they'll use it.
And I think part of them being in school also, for us, it's, it's a real blessing for them, one, to be in school, but the therapists are working with administrators and teachers already to say, what's the best class for me to pull this kid out? Like which day, which time, so they're already including that. And so that they can excuse the child from class and the kid goes over to their Zoom meeting or whatever they're using with the therapist, sees them, the therapist sends a message that they're on their way back. So, we can track kids better that way as far as what they're doing, but also help them with the struggles that they're having, just like when we're in school.
Well, what about teenagers that are incredibly image conscious? One of the downfalls of social media is wanting to look just like, X, Y, or Z, or dancing and, not measuring up to social standards. Okay, so suddenly you've got teenagers in these situations that don't want to have their camera on. How can they interact or partake in school if they feel they're having a bad hair day or they don't look as good as, I don't know, Sally? I don't know if there's a Sally in any of my children's classes, but I'm just saying that's a big deal too. People wanting to present their best selves on camera.
We've talked about that too, and the fact that, and it leads into another problem. Sometimes the connectedness in some households, in some neighborhoods, is not as good as others for the internet. And so we want to be able to be respectful, but also get the service, and we can do that through phone. And sometimes kids can turn off the camera, doesn't mean they turn off the lesson. And so the teachers will engage highly on that part. The therapists, we've done therapy on telephone therapy. And, that's part of being respectful to them and their needs. But you can still be quite interactive on a phone call and being able to track that. So that, I don't know if that helps, but yeah, we've thought that through, and it has worked this summer with therapy and with school. So
do you have any suggestions for parents, families, and caregivers when their students do start or may start developing odd habits that you said earlier, when they're really excited or suddenly shut down and very depressed, or if they start, I don't know, talking to themselves or isolating in their rooms or coming down at full makeup at, 7:30, ready to go, just things that are off what parents and caregivers could do, or can they reach out through the school for mental health counseling, or will there be like a newsletter that's set out as like, oh, is your kid, doing this? This might be something you can help with.
Typically when we're in buildings and we're in regular school, our teachers and the administration are our referral sources because they have eyes on kids all the time. And right now we're really going to be relying on parents to be watching for those symptoms because they have eyes on their kids and they're going to know best if there are changes. So we're definitely encouraging parents and families, if they're seeing those changes, to reach out to their school and say, this is what's going on. And do you have a mental health therapist in your building? And then the thing that we have, the opportunity that we have now through this COVID world, that's kind of a silver lining, is even if there's maybe not a therapist available, we might be able to expand some of our services to those schools because we have the availability right now to do that.
How would you do that?
Being able to just look at our therapist caseloads and who has availability and time to expand to other buildings and be able to connect with kids via the virtual platforms.
I would imagine the numbers at different schools will change because of either children that are at real-time virtual school options or have taken the online only options. So that will that makes the numbers change a little bit.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I think, some of the therapists are already planning, like a therapist who's doing an evening parent group. So she's doing that at 6:30, way out of what our normal work hours are, but she has the freedom to flex her time to meet the kids and the family's needs. So, having Zoom again has been a blessing in that regard.
So that would be a plus. I would imagine there are other pluses that have occurred to you over the summer as you're preparing for September that you may not normally be using. I mean, the silver lining meetings at that point with, being able to see into a child's classroom, or I'm sorry, their home, and their parent zipping in. What are some other positives that you have come across as you're preparing for September?
I'll give you a couple of them. One is transportation. Transportation is a huge issue with some of our families. And if we can get a connectedness through telephone or through the internet, I just look at a single guardian just trying to do meals, childcare, just keeping the house going. We don't lose transportation time. We don't have to, if the car's broken down. That's one huge one. The time has been more effective and efficient. And we found some have enjoyed shorter times than, quote, your traditional hour session, but we can check in with them twice a week, for example, rather than say, oh, we'll see you next week. So there's been a few things that have really been helpful that we've learned.
So when you're talking about your school day starting, usually, what is that going to be, 8 o'clock? Your days will go from, 7 through 7 p.m., 8,
I think it will vary from therapist to therapist, depending on their caseloads, what their needs are. And, they've got families as well. Yeah. And we always encourage highly them taking care of themselves and their families so that, they can really know that they're their best when they're working with our kids and families. That's so important that they do that.
Marilis, how many, and I'm just directing this to you because you're talking about, the different protocols, but can you tell me on average how many students a counselor will typically have on their caseload?
During a regular school setting, they would have anywhere from 25 to 30 typically, depending, of course, on the needs of the clients. So that's kind of our average for each therapist, though.
So with when you're talking about needs for the client, what's the breadth of issues that the mental health team handles? Is that everything from social anxiety to depression, or what kind of things do you look for during a normal year? And then what kind of things are you concerned about happening at the start of this year, at least?
I feel like I
think
don't know how to answer that.
Yeah.
I think the range is
range?
really
Really?
anywhere from
Yeah.
social anxiety to kids that struggle with thought disorders. You know, we've certainly plenty of kids that have schizophrenia or bipolar, those sort of things. So it's very different. I think that we are going to see, like Dave said earlier, I believe that we'll have an increase in things like anxiety and depression. You know, this has been very difficult for everybody.
Well, and even, I mean, I said I didn't know how to answer it because I think it's just we have such a broad spectrum that we work with, you know, and it varies from family issues to individual issues to substance use to, I mean, you name it, we cover it, I feel like.
And with the computers in front of the students every day, being able to reach those kids is got to be more of a challenge for the therapists and for the teachers to even identify. So again, it's working with parents or giving parents tools to help identify that, wait, no, this is something that's on the normal level, or this might be a little bit more concerning. What is there going to be available then for parents or caregivers to make that judgment call?
I know our staff are definitely working with especially their school counselors to put out information about signs and symptoms to look for.
Okay.
And not only for parents, but you know, when you get into high school, middle school, those kids can self-refer. And so a big part of that too is for kids to have the empowerment to advocate for their own mental health and the ability to know, you know, when they are struggling, there is help and there's resources through their school building, you know, and so really helping to empower them to reach out and advocate for themselves.
Realizing that they have the power to make their own mental health decisions at age, is it 14?
13 and up.
13 and up.
Yep.
This will be my last question then about concerns regarding reaching kids. What about the kids that don't want to have anything to do with mental health? How can you help those parents? Because the kid's 14, or you said 13, and maybe you're seeing something that parents need help with, but the kid doesn't want to engage.
I can kind of tell you a few things, at least to watch for. You know, if a student stops enjoying things they used to, if they complain about body aches more than they used to, if their sleeping pattern changes more than it used to,
Eating
habits.
Everybody's eating habits has changed right now.
Personal hygiene.
Yeah, personal hygiene, yeah.
All of those, you know, that's where kind of the parent guardian actually has to step in and say, wait a second, we may need to get help. The school has, you know, the mental health program. We also have school counselors, the nurses, the administration, the teachers. There's community resources of our other mental health. There's national, you know, crisis lines that they can call. There's the community talk lines and helplines. It's going to take all of us, because the anxiety and the trauma of COVID is real. It'll be one of the best ways to prevent some of that is providing structure. School does that. It also gives a sense of control, and that's such a valuable thing, whether it's virtual or kind of a hybrid model, but it can be provided. It just, with all this virtual stuff, we really need to provide our kids with kind of projects that has a start, a middle, and an end. Because just being on the social media or on virtual for 6 hours a day feels like nothing gets accomplished. So in school, you get projects, you get lessons. There's a sense of accomplishment by the social part of it. You're not isolated, at least, you know, physically you may be. But families, if the student says, I don't want any help, may actually have to watch those changes and step in and say, I'm noticing this.
I love hearing all of this about structure and control, and I really appreciate the fact that the school has put in the time to make sure that these resources are still available to our students and kids, because as you said, this is all real, it's all happening, and everybody is going to need help. So thank you very much for joining us today. I am thrilled. Lots of good information here for everybody to access. All of these videos are actually archived on our video site at Northwest Passages, and you can watch it for free. And thank you for taking advantage of this forum this afternoon. And again, thank you both Julie, Marilis, and David for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristi.